Be rude to the waitress. You deserve to get gassed. Also, please hit the subscribe button.
My dad was an asshole. A lovable asshole. A compassionate, intelligent, caring asshole. But piss him off and he became the pettiest asshole you would ever meet. I have so many stories about his pettiness, but this one is one of my favorites. And before anyone asks, I loved my dad fiercely and miss him every day. He passed way too soon. One important thing to know about my dad is that if having the most noxious fart were an Olympic sport, he would have had multiple gold medals. Long car rides with him could be dangerous. And you knew that if dad was in the toilet before you got there, you waited until anything he left dissipated, especially if he just had a nice, rich meal. Dad and I both loved diners, and when we traveled, we would always ask where the good local diners were. On one of our college trips, we arrived at our hotel a little early, and our room wasn't ready. The hotel clerk was very apologetic. Some of their housekeeping staff had called in sick and they were running behind. Since we hadn't had lunch yet, it was around 2:30-ish, we asked the clerk for their diner recs, and they suggested a place not far from the hotel. Off we go to lunch. Y'all, it's been over 30 years, but I still remember how good that food was. And our waitress, Sandy. Why do I remember her name? Because the couple at the table near us kept yelling it over and over and over again. There were maybe 10 people in the restaurant total, and Sandy was taking care of most of them. She was on the younger side, but knew her stuff. I always like to ask what the staff likes when I'm making my decisions, and she told me what she liked, what they were known for, and what the day grill cook excelled at. As Dad and I were thoroughly enjoying our food, we watched this couple treat Sandy like she was stupid. They sent their food back multiple times, and said nasty things about Sandy so loud that we had no trouble overhearing them. Every time Sandy came to drop something off or check on us, she just looked more and more upset. Since we weren't in a hurry, and the restaurant wasn't busy, we lingered over our meal, ordered dessert, and were still there when the mean couple paid their check. You paid at the cash register, and told Sandy, quite loudly, that since her service was so bad, all they were leaving her was $1 tip and they thought that was being generous. They left, and when Sandy came to give us our check, she looked like she had been crying. Dad went to pay the check and gave her a very generous tip. When we got in the car, he was pissed, and I got to hear a lecture about how if he ever found out I treated a server like those people had, he would whoop my ass no matter how old I was. We get back to the hotel and had just checked in when another couple walked into the lobby. They headed towards the elevator that we were heading towards, and Dad and I both realized that it was the nasty couple from the restaurant who had been so mean to Sandy. We got on the elevator with them. They were staying on a floor above ours. Just as the door opened on our floor and I was walking out, my dad paused, let out a large, noxious fart and said, "That's for Sandy," and then walked off, smiling as the elevator door closed, hotboxing the nasty couple in with his equally nasty fart. I laughed so hard I cried. I do feel bad for anyone else who had to ride that elevator after that. Story 2. Don't announce your engagement at someone else's wedding, or this might just happen to you. Last summer, I was at a cousin's wedding. His bride and her family had been close with ours since before I was born, and the couple had known each other since they were toddlers, so it was a particularly exciting event for both sides of the family. However, after the ceremony was over and the party had only just started, one of the bridesmaids decided to announce her own engagement. The attention was immediately taken away from the newlyweds and brought to the bridesmaid, who I'll call Sarah, and her equally smug fiancé. My cousin's wife, I'll call her Emma, didn't make a scene or utter a single negative word about Sarah. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but she kept grinning and acted very happy for the other couple. This was unusual, as Emma is typically quite confrontational and speaks her mind no matter the consequences. Sarah later picked Emma to be the maid of honor at her own wedding, which took place last weekend. I wasn't there for it, but my cousin sent me some of the best bits on Snapchat and explained the whole situation. This is where the fun begins. Emma's two much younger sisters were the flower girls at Sarah's wedding. At the very last moment, Emma switched out the white petals in their baskets to blue ones she had secretly brought with her. She told her sisters not to say anything about it or let the bride see them until it was time to scatter them down the aisle. Sarah looked very confused upon seeing the blue petals, which didn't coordinate whatsoever with her theme. But of course, she didn't say anything about it in the moment. Most of Sarah's other bridesmaids were also Emma's friends, had attended Emma's wedding, and were in on Emma's scheme. At the reception, Emma's sisters and the other bridesmaids were tight-lipped when Sarah began demanding to know why there were blue petals. The wedding planner ended up getting a lot of abuse for not checking the flower girls' baskets before they walked down the aisle. Finally, it was time for the speeches. The speeches took place in front of a massive screen, displaying a loop of photos with Sarah and her husband, which had been compiled by Emma. Emma took the remote that controlled the presentation screen, and at first she showed some pre-approved humorous photos of Sarah with Emma and other friends to facilitate a couple lighthearted jokes. Then, at the very end, Emma said to Sarah that she must be wondering why there were blue petals instead of the white ones originally planned. That was when Emma displayed the last slide from her presentation. Emma announced in front of everyone that she was 5 months pregnant and that she just discovered the baby was a boy, hence the blue petals. The last slide, her ultrasound picture. There were shocked yells and gasps. Sarah had a fit, but those involved in the scheme cheered so loudly that I sincerely regret watching the Snapchat recordings with headphones. Apparently, Sarah had been very nasty to her bridesmaids before, driving several of them away and forcing the others to pay ridiculous amounts of money for dresses. Emma and my cousin were eventually thrown out of the party, but they were all smiles. Sarah's fuming mother went to confront her outside, and Emma retorted with, "Gentle, gentle, I'm pregnant." I reckon Sarah doesn't speak to the majority of those bridesmaids anymore.